sur une rue sécuritaire, protégée par des fiers soldats sous notre drapeau canadien. Le Canada d'abord pour faire changement. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much, everyone, for having me here at Petroplastics, an incredible company that Ed and Steve have built, employing hundreds of people in the plastics sector. You might not think about plastics very often, but these products that they have literally protect medical equipments. They keep hospital bedding clean so you don't get an infection when you're lying in bed at the hospital, God forbid. They preserve the foods that are necessary for our very survival. These are the kinds of businesses that often don't get enough notice, but who make our lives possible and enjoyable. And they've been in business for 40 years. And we're very blessed to have businesses like this, even though after the lost Liberal decade, they have been under attack by higher taxes, more red tape, blocking their operations, and an existential threat in the form of the plastics ban, which will drive up the cost of food, of clothing, and other essentials of life that require plastic wrapping and protection. Everything will become more expensive if this latest radical Liberal policy is allowed to go ahead. After the lost Liberal decade, with our economy down under America's thumb and costs and crime up, we cannot allow them to have a fourth term. We need a change with a Canada-first Conservative government. They will axe taxes, build homes, unleash our resources, and bring home the billions of dollars that have been lost so that we have the economic strength to stand up to the Americans. Now, we know that that takes a team, and we have an incredible team here. I want to thank the great Melissa Landsman, our deputy leader, and a champion across all the GTA and all of Canada. We have Anna Roberts, BJ Powdell, Roman Baber, Don Patel, and Michael Guglielmin. They want to work to put the country first. But, of course, we have a lot of work to do to reverse the lost Liberal decade. Over the last 10 years and 3 terms of Liberals in power, much of it with Mark Carney as Chief Economic Advisor to Justin Trudeau, Canada's had the worst economic growth in the G7. We're now projected to have the worst economic growth for the next 10 years and 30 years in all of the OECD. $460 billion more has left Canada for the U.S. than has returned. That's Canadian investment dollars building American pipelines, American mines, American office towers, and paying American paychecks. I want to bring that money home. U.S. GDP per person has been 18% over the last decade. In Canada, it's been 1.4%, not per year, over the whole decade. In other words, there's been no economic growth. And south of the border, their growth has been 14 times higher. Canadian workers are better, and yet they make less, about $20,000 less per year compared to their American counterparts. Now, why is this? Well, the answer is they get less investment. If you take the total investment in the entire American economy, divided by the number of workers, it's about $28,000 per worker. In Canada, it's $15,000. So the American worker gets almost twice as much investment in tools, technology, and machines as his Canadian competitor. So how is the Canadian factory going to compete with its American counterpart when the U.S. one is adding tools and technology twice as fast? It's just not possible. And we're falling behind as a result. Our wages are down, our people cannot pay their bills, and we are more dependent on the Americans than ever before. One of the reasons is our very high capital gains tax, which punishes people for selling an old investment and reinvesting in a new one. So imagine you're a factory with a vacant piece of land. You want to sell it to a home builder who's going to provide houses to families, and then reinvest the proceeds in expanding your factory. Everybody wins, right? More homes for our youth, more production from the factory, more people working, which means more taxes going to the government. But you can't do that because you'd be hit with a massive capital gains tax on the sale of that land. So you don't. The transaction never happens. The factory never gets expanded. The homes never get built. And by the way, the government, which is trying to tax revenue out of the economy, ends up getting less because there's no transaction to tax. So in irony, everybody loses. More and more, businesses just look abroad. They send their money out of Canada, and they're rewarded for doing so. Look at Mark Carney. He moved one of his funds to Bermuda to dodge Canadian taxes. He moved his company headquarters to New York. He's growing his assets in China. Also, he can avoid paying the Canadian taxes that he and the Liberals want to impose on everyone else, all while he hides these continuing conflicts of interest from the sight of Canadians. Now, he will say all the right things in the 30 days leading up to the election, but you cannot believe him. Just this week, he was caught having plagiarized his way through university, 10 confirmed, documented examples of plagiarism, which proves that he will do anything and he will say anything to trick people into getting him what he wants. Well, what we want, by contrast, is to put Canada first. And that is why I am announcing today the Canada First Reinvestment Tax Cut. No capital gains when you reinvest the money here in Canada. What do you think? You agree with that? So let's go back to my example. The factory sells the land to the home builder. The home builder builds the homes. The factory takes the money and reinvests it immediately in an expansion, hiring more workers, adding more machines, creating more jobs, and helping us to become more independent. 100% of their sale proceeds will go back into that reinvested factory, which means they'll be able to grow more and faster. Or think of companies that have invested abroad. This would allow them to sell those foreign investments and bring it home tax-free. Think of a retiring deli owner who sells his deli and he wants to put the money to work in a safer and more secure, less active investment, the Canadian stock market, money that will then flow into companies that hire workers in this country. Well, he will be able to do that. At the end of the day, this will mean more investment. This will be like economic rocket fuel for Canada to put us in liftoff. We will soar above the Americans. We will reverse the lost Liberal decade, and make this country boom. The Americans will see the investment pouring back over the border into Canada, and it will allow us to build the infrastructure we need: pipelines, mines, factories, export terminals that will get our goods overseas, going around the Americans, making us more independent and helping build that economic fortress so that never again do the Americans have us in such a weak position as the Liberals have put us after the lost Liberal decade. It will allow more home building. You think of a small family that invests in a few rental properties. They decide to sell those 5 or 6 properties and reinvest them and to build 10 more. Well, they would be able to roll that money right in, 100% tax deferred, to build the homes of the future. It'll allow small businesses to sell an old, tired asset and reinvest it in inventing new technologies that will make our economy break through. It will mean more mines, more pipelines, more factories, more data centers, more housing, more paychecks, more economic independence. In other words, putting Canada first for a change. We will also preserve the existing lifetime capital gains exemption for small business owners and farmers who will benefit from this deferral on top of their existing exemption. Speaking of farmers, many of them will be able to sell assets to expand their farms. Or a retiring farmer might sell his farm and use the money to invest in a Canadian business. There will also be a very interesting new dynamic. When somebody sells an asset in Canada today, there is literally no extra incentive to reinvest it in Canada. It is just as advantageous from a tax point of view today, under the Liberal regime, to take the money abroad where it can get a lower taxed return later on. However, with the Canada First Reinvestment Tax Cut, it is only available when you reinvest in this country. So you'll be able to invest 1/3 more of your proceeds if you keep it here than you would if you send it abroad. This will cause an economic boom that will give us the economic fortress we need. There's no way the Liberals will allow these kinds of policies to go ahead. It is the same Liberal ministers, the same Liberal MPs, the same Liberal strategists, and the same Liberal promises that they have been breaking for the last 10 years. The only difference is they have an even weaker and more compromised leader than ever before. Under Mark Carney, a Liberal fourth term will be more of the same. You vote the same, you get the same. Mr. Carney has not only said that he wants to keep in place the plastics ban, the cap on Canadian energy, C-69, and the big industrial carbon tax that will drive our businesses abroad, he has doubled down on the radical net zero policies of Justin Trudeau. We know that the next 4 years will be worse than the last 10 if the Liberals are given yet another mandate in power. He will lie and deny. He will exaggerate. He will twist. He will try to avoid accountability for the Liberal record. But we have to have a change in this country. We need a new Conservative government that will reward work, cut taxes, build homes, unleash our resources, greenlight LNG plants, mines, pipelines, and other major economic infrastructure, repeal C-69, get rid of the energy cap, unleash production. We will be a nation that rewards strivers, builders, entrepreneurs, and workers, an economic fortress that will allow us to be stronger, self-reliant, stand on our own 2 feet, and stand up to Donald Trump. We know that Mr. Trump wants to keep the Liberals in power because they will be weak and he will be able to dominate. But we're not going to allow that. Canadians are going to take back control of their economic destiny. The last 10 years were about the Liberals. The next 10 years need to be about you. It's time to reinvest, rebuild, and recharge our country for a change. It's time to put Canada's workers first for a change. It is time to bring home our money and jobs for a change. It is time to restore the Canadian promise for a change, a promise that hard work gets you a great life in a beautiful house on a safe street under a proud flag. Canada first for a change. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We will now take questions from the floor.
Good morning, Mr. Perelev. Thank you for having me. I'm Terence Shen, independent journalist covering foreign policy and global affairs. Recently, Liberal MP Paul Chang suggested that someone could hand over your party's candidate Zhou Tei to China in exchange for a bounty from the communist regime. Many people saw that not only as a threat to Canadian citizen and political opponent, but also legitimizing foreign interference in our democracy. What's your response to his remarks? And after his apology, do you still believe he should be disqualified from running for office? Thank you.
Yes, he must be disqualified. I find it incredible that Mark Carney would allow someone to run for his party that called for a Canadian citizen to be handed over to a foreign government on a bounty, a foreign government that would almost certainly execute that Canadian citizen. Think about that for a second. We have a Liberal MP saying that a Canadian citizen should be handed over to a foreign dictatorship to get a bounty so that that citizen could be murdered. And Mark Carney says he should stay on as a candidate. What does that say about whether Mark Carney would protect Canadians? Mark Carney is deeply conflicted. Just in November, he went to Beijing and secured a $250 million loan for his company from a state-owned Chinese bank. He's deeply compromised, and he will never stand up for Canada against any foreign regime. Is another reason why Mr. Carney must show us all his assets, all the money he owes, all the money that his companies owe to foreign hostile regimes. And this story might not be entirely the story of the bounty and a Liberal MP calling for a Canadian to be handed over for execution to a foreign government might not be something that the everyday Canadian can relate to because it's so outrageous. But I ask you this, if Mark Carney would allow his Liberal MP to make a comment like this, when would he ever protect Canada or Canadians against foreign hostility? He has never put Canada first, and that's why We cannot have a fourth Liberal term. After the lost Liberal decade, our country is a playground for foreign interference. Our economy is weaker than ever before. Our people more divided. We need a change to put Canada first with a new government that will stand up for the security and economy of our citizens and take back control of our destiny. Let's bring it home. Thank you. Merci beaucoup. Je trouve ça incroyable qu'un député libéral dit que quelqu'un devrait arrêter un citoyen canadien et lui emmener chez l'ambassade ou le consulat d'une dictature étrangère pour être tué, pour favoriser une dictature qui a littéralement tué 4 citoyens canadiens. Et M. Carney ne veut pas expulser le député qui a proposé ça. M. Carney est compromis. Il est allé en Chine en novembre pour obtenir un prêt d'une banque de l'État chinois de 250 millions de dollars. Le gouvernement chinois a beaucoup de contrôle sur M. Carney. Il ne va jamais confronter ce gouvernement parce que ses intérêts qu'il détient toujours vont l'empêcher de le faire. Mais je vous pose la question. Si M. Carney est prêt à permettre à l'un de ses députés de suggérer de donner un de nos citoyens à une dictature étrangère pour tuer ce Canadien, est-ce que M. Carney va jamais défendre le Canada? Non, il ne va jamais le faire. Il faut un premier ministre qui met le Canada d'abord, qui met fin à l'ingérence étrangère que les libéraux ont permis pendant une décennie pour reprendre le contrôle de notre pays et pour défendre nos citoyens ici et ailleurs. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Next question.
Good morning, Mr. Poilievre. Kyle Benning from Global News. There have been questions by some conservative strategists about your tactics so far in this campaign, including Stephen Harper's former communications director. Their calls are for the U.S. trade war to become more of a focus for the remainder of the campaign. Do you think that you need to make an adjustment during the campaign to make this more of a focus? And what's your message to those in the party that think so in English and French, s'il vous plaît?
So today, we are standing up to the Americans with a Canada First reinvestment tax cut that will bring tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars of investment into our economy to create an economic fortress against the unjustified and unfair threats of Donald Trump. President Trump has said he wants the Liberals back in power. We know why, because they will keep Canada weak and keep our investment flowing out of this country to the U.S. After the lost Liberal decade of rising costs and crime and a falling Canadian economy under the American thumb, we cannot allow the Liberals a fourth term in office. We need a change with a Canada First government that will axe taxes, build homes, approve resources, bring home the hundreds of billions of dollars the Liberals have pushed out of the economy so that we can stand up to the President from a position of strength. That is what this election is about. Merci beaucoup. J'ai annoncé aujourd'hui qu'on va couper les impôts pour les réinvestissements ici au Canada afin de renforcer notre forteresse économique. Je sais que Donald Trump veut que les libéraux gagnent des élections parce que ils ont affaibli notre économie et favorisé les investissements aux États-Unis. Nous sommes plus vulnérables que jamais après 10 ans des libéraux. Et c'est les mêmes députés libéraux, les mêmes ministres libéraux, les mêmes stratèges libéraux. Et ça va être les mêmes résultats libéraux s'ils sont élus pour une 4e fois. Au contraire, il nous faut un nouveau gouvernement, qui va mettre le Canada d'abord pour faire changement, en coupant les taxes et les impôts, en donnant le feu vert aux projets de ressources naturelles, en ramenant les emplois ici au Canada pour qu'on puisse se tenir debout face à Donald Trump et les États-Unis dans une position de force. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Next question.
Brian Lilly, Toronto Sun. On Friday, there was a court ruling that gave an injunction to a group of people trying to stop the Ontario government from saying you can't have consumption sites, drug consumption sites, within 200 meters of schools and daycares. They claim it violates their Section 7 charter rights to life, liberty, and security of the person, their Section 15(1) charter rights to equality. I'd like your thoughts on that. The judge just gave an injunction, hasn't ruled on it yet, but should courts be deciding how close a drug consumption site is to schools and daycares?
No, this and the Liberal policy behind it are a bloody outrage. The Section 7 charter rights of children should come first. Charter rights to life, liberty, and security of the person means that kids should not be walking around stepping on dirty needles or at risk that an erratic fentanyl addict might lash out and kill a child. What about the charter rights of the beautiful mother who was hit by a stray bullet coming out of a so-called safe consumption site in Toronto just a year ago? What happened to her charter rights? It's not a safe consumption site if there are stray bullets flying out of it. This radical Liberal policy of handing out drugs, bringing people to use cocaine, crack, fentanyl right in the most vulnerable communities around our kids has been a disaster. It has driven crime. It has threatened our children. It has led to 50,000 overdoses, more than died, and overdose deaths, more than died fighting for Canada in the Second World War. When I'm Prime Minister, this Liberal insanity will end. But before I point that, I should just point out, nothing will change under Mark Carney. He has the same radical Liberal MPs and ministers that Justin Trudeau did when he put these consumption sites in place. He has Nathan Erskine-Smith. He now even has Mayor Gregor from Vancouver, who's even more radical in wanting to give out free drugs everywhere. When I'm Prime Minister, this Liberal drug insanity will end. We will ban hard drugs. We will empower police to enforce the law and prosecutors to carry it out. We will stop giving out taxpayer-funded opioids. We will shut down drug consumption sites. We will give life sentences to fentanyl traffickers and treat them like the murderers that they are. And finally, we will put the resources into treatment and recovery so that we can provide rehabilitation, counseling, detox, and we can lift the people up who are struggling with addiction. Our mission must be a drug-free Canada. Our mission must be to put Canada first by bringing our loved ones home drug-free for a change. Thank you.
En français.
Merci beaucoup. Cette politique libérale est une catastrophe et qui a tué des dizaines de milliers de personnes. Des centres de consommation de drogue sont une menace à nos enfants. Avoir des gens qui utilisent le fentanyl, la cocaïne, l'héroïne, les méthamphétamines à côté d'une école pour les enfants, des seringues qui peuvent percer le pied d'un enfant ou quelqu'un qui a une dépendance de drogue, qui est dans une mentalité erratique, peut même attaquer un enfant. C'est une menace aux droits de nos enfants. C'est ridicule après les 10 années perdues des libéraux où ils ont en effet décriminalisé les drogues, donné les opioïdes financés par l'argent des contribuables aux gens avec des dépendances et empêché les policiers de faire leur travail. On a de la chaos dans nos rues. Et les mêmes libéraux, les mêmes députés, mêmes ministres et mêmes stratèges libéraux sont toujours en place. Ils vont continuer avec le chaos. Moi, je vais mettre le Canada d'abord pour faire changement. Je vais bannir les drogues, fermer les centres de consommation, arrêter de donner les opioïdes avec l'argent du public, donner des peines de vie aux trafiquants de fentanyl Et on va réinvestir dans le traitement et la réhabilitation pour nous permettre de sauver les vies et ramener nos frères et sœurs, nos voisins et amis chez eux sans drogue.
Thank you. We will now take a call-in question from the phone line, and this will be the final question.
Inez Rabi, TFO.
Bonjour. Je voulais vous poser la question. Donc, beaucoup d'organismes francophones hors Québec, notamment ici en Ontario, disent être sous-financés par le fédéral et certains voient même leur survie menacée. Donc, ma question, c'est simple, c'est qu'est-ce que ferait un gouvernement conservateur pour améliorer concrètement leur situation? Dans le fond, allez-vous augmenter leur financement si vous êtes élu Premier ministre?
Merci beaucoup. C'est une question que je tiens à cœur. Mon père est un francophone de la Saskatchewan. Il vient d'un petit village qui s'appelle Léoville. Quand son grand-père, mon arrière-grand-père, est arrivé de la France, la famille Poiliev a décidé de préserver le français. Mais mon père m'a essayé de m'enseigner le français quand j'étais très jeune. Ça m'a donné un peu des racines dans la langue, mais évidemment, je l'ai perdu pendant mon adolescence parce qu'à Calgary, il n'y avait pas beaucoup d'opportunités de parler et pratiquer. Mais je suis très heureux d'avoir retrouvé un peu mes racines, même si mon français n'est pas parfait. Ma femme est montréalaise et nos enfants assistent aux garderies en français aussi. Donc, je tiens au cœur la préservation de la langue française. On va aussi préserver les fonds pour supporter des groupes communautaires francophones, leur permettre d'avoir des activités culturelles et de célébrer les traditions francophones à travers le Canada. On va aussi élargir le programme d'immersion pour les jeunes d'aller au Québec ou à l'Acadie ou ailleurs dans la francophonie canadienne pour apprendre le français. J'ai eu l'occasion de le faire au Saguenay. Je pense qu'on devrait ajouter des fonds et des places pour des jeunes anglophones d'aller apprendre le français. C'est en augmentant le nombre de personnes qui sont bilingues à travers le Canada qu'on va pouvoir contribuer à la préservation de la langue et créer même une plus grande solidarité entre les anglophones et les francophones en ce qui concerne la préservation de la langue française. Donc, j'ai hâte de le faire et j'ai hâte de travailler avec vous et les communautés francophones à travers le Canada pour le faire. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. That concludes today's press conference.
Okay, thanks very much, everyone. Oh, j'ai oublié. Ma femme m'a rappelé le fait que M. Carney a montré un manque de respect en éliminant le poste de langues officielles dans son cabinet. Je vais rétablir ce poste-là. On va avoir un ministre responsable pour des langues officielles. Et encore, j'encourage M. Carney de participer à le débat de TVA en respect pour les francophones et de ne pas se cacher en dessous d'une roche. Donc, c'est ça le message. Donc, vive la francophonie canadienne. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay.